We're continuing this garage conversion to a bedroom. We've completed raising the floor to the house level on our previous video and drywalled the bare wall where the garage door was taken down. Show how we raised the closet door opening to make up for the raised floor to the house level. In this video, we will show how we installed vinyl plank flooring to the raised floor. It's a rigid core plank that resists, dents, and hides subfloor irregularities. It's waterproof and it can be used throughout the home. Looks and feels like real wood. It's pre-padded and the tongue and groove system make it real easy to install. This close-up shows the tongue and the groove. Inserting the tongue into the groove is simple and fast once you get used to it. The best way is holding the plank on a 45 angle while inserting the tongue into the groove. Once inserted, lay it flat onto the floor. It should look almost seamless and not able to feel the ridges of either plank. If you do feel some, just tap it lightly with a mallet and you should be good to go. Tools to make this job go smooth, like flat bars, especially made for this type of application. I have two different sizes here. Their purpose is hooking the plank that's usually butted to the wall. There's padding on the side that contacts the surface of the planks to avoid scratching. They shouldn't be used on tongue and groove ends. It will damage them. If for any reason it's necessary to remove a plank, just lift and pull away. It's as simple as that. So these are the most important tools. The mallet, the flat bars. I have both sizes, but you can get by with either one. The small one seems to be too short when swinging the mallet with the wall in the way. Instead, the longer one has plenty of room to give it a single swing to tap the plank into place. Next, it's this important block that comes with the set. This is used to tap the grooved side of the plank into the other grooved plank to make sure it locks in place. Notice the two-step shape on this side, it's shaped like the grooved end of the plank. When tapping against it, it won't damage the groove. It's important to mention to firmly hold the block down when tapping it. If it slips, especially if it slips upward, it can damage the groove and chip the top finish of the plank, which is almost paper thin. Now let's talk about spacers that are needed to place against the wall to gain a 1/4 inch gap between the first layer of planks and the wall as recommended by the manufacturer. This is called an expansion gap. They will also help lining the first row straight. The spacers have a 1/2 inch gap on the other side as well. I'm not sure if they make a floor molding thicker than a 1/2 inch to cover that gap, but I'm guessing it can be used to make use for a crooked wall, where you can use the two different size gaps to make up for waves and keep a straight line of planks. As you'll find out soon in this video, your first row against the wall is very important. To properly prep it and to take your time will be very crucial as you keep adding more rows of planks. You start with a crooked line, you will end up with crooked results. In plain language, your first row will be your guide throughout the whole thing. Just to give a visual, here's the difference between the 1/4 inch gap and the 1/2 inch gap. Now that we went over the installation procedure and we went over some of the tools, we want to get the floor ready. I'm using this adhesive and grout I had laying around to level and fill gaps that might show through the plank surface if not filled. On this floor, it'll be plywood butt joints that might be too far apart or any other small imperfections in the wood. This will take care of it. Simply apply it in the joint cracks like you would with regular grout and lightly wipe off with a damp sponge. Make sure that you don't forget to wipe it, because once this gets hard, it will not scrape or sand easily, unless you want to use a grinder. Next is to clean the floor. A shop vac is ideal for us. Wipe down the surface with a damp sponge if needed. Before you lay down the planks, it's important to have a dry, clean, and flat subfloor. We have all our tools ready. We start the first row of planks thunk side facing the wall as per the instructions. They also recommend to trim the tongue off the first row facing the wall, but we left them on without any consequences. We set up the first planks with the 1/4-inch spacers, measured how many planks from wall to wall, and determined where to start the first staggered plank. As mentioned earlier, prepping the first row is everything. Take your time and it will pay off. One other thing that can affect this installation is the wall where you start the first row. Notice we put a spacer on each side of the compounded wall joint because the wall has a slight belly there. Avoiding to place a spacer on it will not cause it to transfer the curve to the floor planks. So very important to check your wall. Use a chalk line if you have to. So at the end of the first row, we are ending up with 18 inches to complete the row. Sounds perfect, right? That happens to be half the plank length. So we'll be able to use the other half of the plank to complete the second row on the other end of the wall. This also determines our staggering pattern throughout the entire floor, but it's also the one they do not advise if you look at the chart. I did some research on this and called a few people that install these, and they see nothing wrong with this pattern. It's a matter of taste. It doesn't interfere with the locking. As long as none of the joints are not in line, like shown on the middle sample of this chart, it should be fine. So we mark and cut our first plank in half, and we have completed our first row. Now we begin our second row by using a whole plank, which will show our first staggered pattern that will continue to the other wall where we will use the leftover cut plank. Remember to keep an eye on the straight line during the installation of the first few rows. They have a tendency to shift a little. After the third row, you can put some weights on the installed planks, or someone can stand on them like we'll be doing while the new planks are tapped in. It's a good idea to mix the planks from at least 3 different boxes so the grain and color designs can mix throughout the floor. Here's another example when to use the flat bar, and here's the leftover half plank, which fit perfectly at the end of the second row. With a whole plank, we start our third row. As we tap in each plank, we keep an eye on the previous row, making sure there's no shifting and separating. As we cut each plank in half, it's easy to confuse which half goes where, so after identifying each one, we place it where it will be installed. I know it sounds silly, but it's very easy to lose track. We almost cut a new plank because we left the other half on the floor in the cutting area. By the way, I need to mention our cutting tools as well. Although the instructions mention the planks can be cut by scoring a line with a razor blade and then snap, well, good luck with that. This cutting tool will be a favorite godsend gift by the end of this job. Just make sure you wear a mask and or have a vacuum line attached like this one. If you end up with more than a 1/4 inch gap, make sure you have a sample piece of the molding you will be using to measure if it will cover the gap. If not, you can either tap the plank towards the wall or cut a new plank. Once we get to the door threshold, we can pre-install the track for the transition molding and measure the plank to butt against it, or, as we did, make it a little longer so we could decide later how far out we want the threshold molding to transition into the tiles. I will explain how we did this towards the end of the video. After cutting it to length, we placed the plank next to the door molding and measured to cut the notch to fit around the door molding and made sure it would fit under the door frame as well as giving it a nice finish. After we made sure it fit, it was tapped in place. Now, if you're paying attention, you realize that our pattern scheme is off. That means the 1/2 inch plank pattern will be off until we finish the doorway, and we'll resume again as soon as we get to the wall next to the doorway. We're talking about approximately 4-inch difference. You get the idea. After installing 3-hole rows, we get to the other side of the door jamb. The same thing on this side of the doorway. Measure and cut the length first, then measure the notch around the doorway. A speed square is ideal for this. Make sure the notch plank is at least 1/8 of an inch under the molding and doorway frame before tapping in the joints. Keep sweeping the surface of the subfloor every row or two and continue laying those planks. It gets easier after each row. Don't rush it and give your knees and back a break whenever you feel it's necessary. Wearing knee pads is a big plus. Once you get past that halfway point, you will feel that confidence even more and get you to the finish line. Here we're at the end of the wall and notching a plank going into the closet. We were straight in line from wall to wall within 1/8 of an inch. I call it a miracle because these walls were so crooked. Laying the plank inside the closet after this row, we used many of the leftover planks that were left over cutting. Believe it or not, there was just as much notch cutting to get around the closet end walls as the rest of the room. Last thing was to make sure the quarter-round floor molding would cover the expansion gap, and it looked fantastic. We now move on to the threshold molding, which I will quickly explain how simple it is to install. It's not a big deal if you follow the instructions, and it's all common sense. The molding is installed with a galvanized metal track like this, included in a package. You want to screw it onto the floor, but not on the planks between the two transitions and preferably under the door, and then snap on the molding that you cut to fit. Alright, we started by cutting the transition molding and the metal track to size and measured the center under the door, and now cutting off the access plank so we can screw the track onto the wooden subfloor, staying away 1/8 of an inch from the planks. That's for expansion. This DeWalt cordless oscillator is ideal for this. Look for the link in the description for one of these. They are amazing. Then remove the debris. Lay the metal track and molding to make sure it fits, taking into account that 1/8 of an inch gap. Make sure the molding fully overlaps the planks and the ceramic tile. And using the screws supplied with the molding, screw it down using pre-drill holes already on the track. Do not over tighten to prevent the track from bowing. Align the molding on the track and gently press it in the track channel until you feel and hear it snap in. Using the mallet, you can give it a few taps, and all you should do after this is silicone all around to prevent water from getting to the subfloor when mopping. There may be a slight color variation due to the nature of the decor, and they're easy to clean with a damp cloth. And this completes the installation. On the next video, we will continue this conversion from garage to bedroom, how we cut and install baseboard moldings to the new raised and planked floor. I hope this gives you an idea of what's involved converting a garage. I also want to mention that we are not professionals, and you should consult with your local codes. For information on tools and material used in this video, see the links in the description. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. And have a great day.